Okay, let's dive in. We're going to meet a microscopic organism that's been our silent partner for, well, thousands of years. It really is the unsung hero behind some of our favorite foods, drinks, and believe it or not, even the fuel in our cars.
So think about it for a second. I mean, they all come from totally different plants, right? They're made using completely different processes, but they all share one single, absolutely crucial ingredient. It's like an invisible helper working its magic behind the scenes.
And the answer is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. You probably just know it as baker's or brewer's yeast. This tiny, single-celled fungus, and get this, its name literally means sugar fungus, is the powerhouse behind all of these amazing things. It's been with us for millennia, and we're still discovering just how incredible its potential really is.
So here's the plan for this explainer. We're going to see our little fungus at work in 5 different roles. First, we'll look at its super clever survival strategy. Then, we'll explore its role as an artist in winemaking, its job as the foundation of bread, its secret mission in making chocolate, and finally, its high-tech application in fueling a greener future. Okay, so how in the world did this tiny organism get to be so important in all these industries? Well, it all comes down to this brilliant and kind of ruthless survival strategy called make, accumulate, consume. What you're seeing here is yeast's aggressive 2-step game plan. First, when it finds itself in a sugary place, like, say, a vat of grape juice, it starts pumping out ethanol. This alcohol is actually toxic to other microbes, so it basically clears out the competition. Then, and this is the brilliant part, once the coast is clear, the yeast switches gears and starts eating the very ethanol it just made to fuel its own growth. It's a masterclass in dominating an environment. All right, let's see that strategy in action in one of its most famous gigs, winemaking. But here, it's not just about making alcohol. No, it's about being an artist, crafting the entire sensory experience of the wine, what's known as the fermentation bouquet.
This whole process is driven by something called the Ehrlich pathway. Now, to put it simply, the yeast grabs amino acids from the grapes and, through this 3-step chemical makeover, turns them into what we call higher alcohols. You can think of these as the basic building blocks for a wine's aroma and its character. They create everything from floral notes to that familiar warmth you feel.
And here's where the real magic happens. Those higher alcohols then get combined with other molecules to create things called esters. Esters are the true superstars of that fermentation bouquet we talked about. They're responsible for almost all of the fruity and floral aromas we love in wine. You can see right here how different esters made by our friend S. cerevisiae directly give us specific smells like banana, rose, and pineapple. Pretty cool, right? And today, winemakers are pushing this even further. Instead of just using one strain of yeast, they're creating these mixed starter cultures. By pairing it with other non-Saccharomyces yeasts, they can fine-tune the final flavor. I mean, look at this table. If you combine it with Hensiospora vinae, you can literally double the amount of an ester that gives you that lovely rose-like scent. It's a perfect blend of microbiology and pure artistry.
Okay, so from the wine glass, let's head over to the bread basket. Yeast's job here is just as ancient and just as fundamental, but now it's all about using a different byproduct of fermentation.
And that byproduct is carbon dioxide. As the yeast munches on the sugars in the flour, it releases both ethanol and CO2 gas. Now, the ethanol mostly just bakes off in the oven, but the CO2 gets trapped in the dough's stretchy gluten network. It's these tiny little gas bubbles that make the dough rise, giving bread its amazing light and airy texture.
But, not just any old yeast will do the trick. We've spent centuries selecting just the right strains of S. cerevisiae for baking. Big industrial bakers need yeast that pumps out CO2 really fast and can handle the main sugar from flour, which is maltose. And if they're making sweetbreads, the yeast has to be tough enough to survive high sugar concentrations. Plus, for it to be useful commercially, it's got to be able to survive being dried out so it can be packaged and stored.
Now, for something you might not expect, you probably don't think of yeast when you think of chocolate, but it plays an absolutely critical role. See, raw cocoa beans are actually bitter and pretty unpleasant. It takes a multi-stage fermentation, which is kicked off by yeast, to develop the precursors for that iconic flavor we all know and love.
When cocoa beans are harvested, they're covered in this sweet, sugary pulp, and that's where the spontaneous fermentation begins. As you can see on this timeline, for the first day or two, it's the yeasts like S. cerevisiae that are running the show. They ferment the sugars into ethanol. This first step completely changes the environment, and that paves the way for bacteria to take over for the next few days, which then makes the temperature shoot up. So, why is that first yeast phase so important? Well, it's not just about making ethanol. The yeast also produces these enzymes that break down the thick, gooey pulp around the beans. This turns the pulp into liquid, which lets oxygen get into the pile of beans. It also eats up some acids, which raises the pH. So, without yeast setting the stage, the other essential bacteria couldn't do their job. And those chemical reactions that create chocolate's amazing flavor, they would never even get started.
Okay, now let's make a big jump from ancient foods to some really modern technology. It turns out that the very same fermentation that gives us wine and bread is being used on a massive industrial scale to produce bioethanol, a renewable fuel. So bioethanol comes in two main generations. The first generation stuff is made from food crops like corn and sugarcane. And this, as you can imagine, started a whole food versus fuel debate. Because of that, the focus has really shifted to second-generation biofuels. These use non-food sources. Think wood chips, agricultural waste, straw. This is really where the future of sustainable biofuel is heading. And make no mistake, this is a huge global industry. This chart just gives you a snapshot of how dominant the United States, which mostly uses corn, and Brazil, which uses sugarcane, are in this field. I mean, together, they produce over 85% of the entire world's fuel ethanol. All of that is thanks to the hard work of yeast inside giant bioreactors. But the innovation doesn't stop there. Scientists are now genetically engineering S. cerevisiae to make it even more powerful. By tweaking its DNA and adding new metabolic pathways, they're turning these yeast cells into tiny factories that can produce even better, more advanced biofuels like propanol and butanol. These have more energy and can be blended with gasoline at higher concentrations.
And this really is just the beginning. As this quote from our source paper points out, we've honestly only scratched the surface. There's so much potential, whether it's by fine-tuning the strains we already use or by going out and exploring the massive genetic diversity of wild yeasts out in nature. They could hold the keys to even more incredible applications we haven't even dreamed of yet. So, from a simple sugar fungus to a key player in food, wine, and renewable energy, Saccharomyces cerevisiae is truly an unsung hero. It really makes you wonder, in the vast unseen microbial world that's all around us, what other tiny powerhouses are just waiting for us to discover their potential?